Moscow will burn. That's the warning that Ukraine has been delivering for months. Putin has heard it. He has tried to ignore it. But after Volodymyr Zelenskyy delivered a pair of brutal bombshells back to back, Putin has to realize that the end is coming. Why? Ukraine might be bringing the gasoline, but it's Putin's own people who are going to light the match. Ukraine now has a historic chance to end the war once and for all, as Putin has just been told that members of his own inner circle are united with Ukraine in a desire for peace. And if peace doesn't come, well, Ukraine's second bombshell will ensure that Putin submits to force if he doesn't submit to pressure. We'll start with the inner circle, and we'll let Zelenskyy do the talking. On July 10th, Zelenskyy delivered his evening address, as he does every day, and he used it to send a message to Putin that will feel like a dagger plunged directly into the heart of Russia's leader. The fuel crisis in Russia is deepening, which is entirely fair in response to Putin's unwillingness to end this war. We have made proposals on how to bring peace closer, Zelenskyy said. Okay, so far so standard, but then the bomb was dropped. We have support not only among partners around the world, but also among Putin's circle regarding peace. They understand what is happening there and that there is no alternative to peace, Zelenskyy declared. And just like that, paranoid Putin realized that there are traitors in his midst. Members of his own inner circle who do not share his insane thirst for a war that has caused over 1.42 million casualties and counting. Panicked, Putin will be wondering who has turned on him. Is it just one or two people? A handful? Everybody? We'll speculate soon, but frankly none of this would come as a surprise to any leader who isn't as purposefully ignorant as Putin. Zelenskyy mentions the fuel crisis that is rocking Russia, and that is a crisis of Ukraine's design that was specifically created to make Russia's people turn against their leader. Ukraine's long-range strikes can now reach every part of Russia that matters. Refineries are burning all over the country, with the most remarkable of Ukraine's strikes being a 2,500-kilometer-plus assault on Siberia's Omsk refinery. That facility was never meant to be in Ukraine's range, not even close. But now that it is, every Russian from the elites Zelenskyy claims are circling Putin like sharks to the average person on the street is unhappy and wants a change. As we speak, almost all of Russia's 83 regions are dealing with fuel shortages of varying levels of severity, CNN reports, and gas station queues extend for miles in many locations. There is desperation inside Russia. And some think that desperation could lead to Putin jumping before he's pushed. Literally. Zelenskyy isn't the only one saying that Putin has trouble with his inner circle. On July 13th, Metro reported that Estonia's foreign minister, Margus Tsahkna, is saying something similar. Even among the oligarchs, more and more are doubting Putin's war. Many who spoke of victory a year ago no longer believe it, Tsahkna revealed. And when talking about pressure piling onto Putin's shoulders, Tsahkna didn't hold back. It's just as possible that one day he'll jump out of a window with his family. After all, things like that happen in Russia. Things like that do indeed happen in Russia. Only it's usually at Putin's command, and there is a lot more pushing out of those windows involved than jumping. We get a little insight into the desperate mindset that some believe Putin now has as he watches his war against Ukraine not only stall out on the ground, but evolve into a fight that Ukraine is winning. The drones flying all over Russia are a constant reminder to Putin that he has failed to protect his people as he always claimed that he would. That failure stings. And even an authoritarian like Putin has to know that there is only so much of this that his people and his inner circle will be able to take before they collectively have enough and join Ukraine in forcing the peace that Putin doesn't want. As we said before, Ukraine has brought the gasoline. It's Putin's own people who may light the match. But Zelenskyy mentions members of Putin's inner circle, and that can only lead to speculation running rampant about who is close to Putin but showing support for Ukraine. Perhaps that's the point. A vague mention of somebody supporting Ukraine is enough to get the gears in paranoid Putin's head whirring. And it's almost inevitable that Russia's leader will be looking over his shoulder as he remembers that there has been talk of coups and mutinies in the very recent past. It was only in May that rumors were swirling that former Russian defense minister and now head of Russia's Security Council, Sergei Shoigu, was involved in some sort of coup plot. Shoigu has the motivation. After years serving under Putin, he was shunted from his prominent role as defense minister to a role where he can have little real impact. That looks like Putin passing the buck for Russia's military failures to us, And Shoigu may well just carry a little resentment about it all. Could he be the member of the inner circle who wants peace just to get back at Putin? Nobody knows, and Zelenskyy isn't telling. On top of those rumors, a very tangible threat of mutiny has been made against Putin by a former Russian soldier. At the end of June, Alexander Lunin posted a video on Instagram where he called out Russia's military for giving troops mindless, suicidal orders, and he claimed that abuse was rampant in the military. Lunin demanded a meeting with Putin. He threatened that a mutiny was brewing, and though he has been arrested since his social media outburst, Lunin also made the claim that he was simply passing along the message that high-ranking officials in Russia's military and security services wanted Putin to hear. More snakes in the grass. More silent members of the inner circle plotting against Putin. One thing we know for sure is that Putin has tightened security around himself as all of these rumors and outright displays of discontent have been going on. The Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project says that the Kremlin has been on high alert since March due to coup rumors. Those who work directly for Putin are no longer allowed to use their cell phones or take public transport, all because Putin is scared of them being influenced or of them leaking details about where he is. In the home of every bodyguard, cook, and even photographer who serves Putin, security cameras have been installed so that Russia's leader can keep an eye out at all times. Putin is scared. That much is clear. And now Zelenskyy claims to have support from an inner circle that already seems to be on the verge of falling apart. Putin's paranoia will only grow deeper. But there's another question that nobody seems to be asking: is Zelenskyy telling the truth? It could be that Zelenskyy has thrown in this casual mention of Putin's inner circle wanting to turn against him and force peace with Ukraine into his evening address to take advantage of Putin's paranoia. Ukraine knows the lengths that Putin is going to in order to protect himself. There's the insane level of security, of course. There are also the reports of Putin spending the vast majority of his time hidden away in underground bunkers, only emerging when he has to make a public appearance. Well, assuming that those appearances aren't just being made by body doubles. Ukraine's drone strikes have been credited as the main reason why Putin now spends time in his bunkers. But maybe it's about more than that. Perhaps Putin thinks that he can control things inside the bunkers while keeping the inner circle wolves at bay. Pravda adds that Putin is now more fearful than ever of assassination attempts, most likely by drone, but perhaps by an angry member of the elite who is done with over 4.5 years of a fruitless war that seems to exist only to massage Putin's fragile ego. And now even artificial intelligence and the threat that it poses is infecting Putin's mind. In the wake of the killing of former Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, the news broke that the assassination was made possible by the use of AI to examine hours upon hours of videos shot by Iranian traffic cameras. That analysis showed the US and Israel where Khamenei was, and bunker-busting bombs followed. Putin is now so worried about the same happening to him that he's trying to stay hidden as much as possible, France 24 reports. The point we're making is that the strong man is filled with fear. Then you have Zelenskyy, in front of his people, often on the front lines or visiting other countries to gather support. Perhaps Zelenskyy's mention of Putin's inner circle is a very carefully planted seed that Ukraine's president knows will burrow its roots deep into the brain of a Russian leader who is terrified of everything around him. Maybe there is no inner circle rebellion at all. If that's the case, Zelenskyy might just be setting the stage for Putin to go on the warpath against his own elites, and if that happens, the possibility of a betrayal will only rise. It's a no-win situation for Russia's leader. And whichever way this goes, whether Zelenskyy is telling the truth or not, this is a masterclass in playing on Putin's paranoia. Scared leaders make rash decisions. They make mistakes. Zelenskyy may be banking on that fact. And if Ukraine's president is indeed telling the truth, that's even worse for Putin. He doesn't want peace. Putin wants his people to back every crazy decision that he makes. Knowing that there are people that he's supposed to be able to trust who are going behind his back and telling Ukraine that they want peace is a blow that Putin may not be able to absorb. Zelenskyy has just sent a message to Putin here. Make peace or your own inner circle will either force you to do it or push you out. However, Ukraine also knows that Putin isn't likely to listen. He's too wrapped up in his obsession, too trapped by his own war to the point where he feels like he can't end it, or the traitors that Zelenskyy says are in the midst will come out of the shadows. Okay, Ukraine says, if the inner circle bombshell isn't enough, maybe the second bombshell will do the job. But before we reveal what that bombshell is, this is The Military Show, where we dig beyond the headlines to give you the full story. If you haven't already, hit subscribe to stay ahead of the curve. In his second bombshell, Zelenskyy gave Putin a glimpse into the future. If Putin doesn't accept peace, Ukraine is going to make his already difficult situation so much worse. And it's going to do that by officially formalizing a deep strike campaign that is already tearing through Russia. This isn't a maybe in the future we'll set something up situation. The decree has been signed and it's all official. Ukraine is creating a new deep strike command named the Long Range Global Impact Command, or LRGIC, that will centralize all of Ukraine's long-range capabilities with the ultimate goal of reducing the Russian military's capacity to the point where it can no longer fight the war that Putin started. The LRGIC isn't quite active yet. Zelenskyy says that a commander for the organization needs to be found, and he promises that this commander will be one of the strongest and most capable leaders that Ukraine's military has at its disposal. But it's coming soon. And the only way that Putin is going to be able to avoid what the LRGIC brings to the table is by finally declaring peace. But what does the LRGIC bring to the table exactly? Zelenskyy explains a little. This command must focus 100% of available resources in order to reduce the Russian war potential even more tangibly. The commander in this direction will be strong and definitely maximally experienced, Ukraine's president revealed. Granted, that doesn't tell us much. However, it suggests that Ukraine is going to bring all of its various long-range units together into a new command structure, much as it did for frontline drone units when it created the Unmanned Systems Forces. Through that centralization, information will be easier to share and coordinated long-range attacks against Russia will be simpler to plan. At least that's our assumption. Zelenskyy isn't giving much away, and much like his claims about Putin's inner circle, that looks like a purposeful move to inspire more fear in a Russian leader who is already on the edge. What we know for sure is that the LRGIC represents the formalization of a deep strike campaign that is already crippling Russia. In 2026, we have seen Ukraine escalate the range, scope, and damage done by its strikes in the Russian rear, both inside Russia itself and in the occupied territories. Everything is a target, from refineries and oil infrastructure to military bases and ammunition depots. The Russian military needs it to function, Ukraine is hitting it. And those hits are coming harder and faster than ever before. According to Euromaidan Press, Ukraine has increased the number of deep strikes carried out against Russia by 1,150% during the first half of 2026, when compared to the same period last year. These strikes, which occur between 500 and 2,000 kilometers beyond the front lines, and sometimes even deeper than that, have hit 172 military or energy facilities. The latter are especially damaging to Russia. US news reports that Russia's gasoline output is down 65% due to Ukraine's strikes against oil refineries, and that fuel crisis we mentioned earlier has come off the back of this long-range campaign. The point we're making here is that Ukraine's deep strike approach was already lethal. Now, with Zelenskyy's new decree, it's going to become even more dangerous. Streamlined, efficient, and brutal on a level that Russia hasn't seen yet, that long-range campaign is set to ruin Russia beyond repair if Putin doesn't take Zelenskyy's call for peace seriously. Deep strikes are becoming institutionalized within Ukraine's military. A dedicated operational branch is being set up, and that is very bad news for Putin. Do you know what else is bad news for Russia's president, as if he needed any more? The US seems to believe that Ukraine's deep strike strategy is working. Perhaps the more cynical among you might think that Zelenskyy is referring to members of the Trump administration when he talks about an inner circle turning against Putin. We won't go that far, but what we will point out is that there has been a remarkable turnaround in the US approach to the Ukraine war, and it seems to be Ukraine that is getting all of the support now, that it's clear that Putin isn't going to accept peace unless he is forced. For instance, US President Donald Trump was full of praise for Ukraine's long-range approach when he met Zelenskyy during the July NATO summit in Ankara. He called Ukraine's approach an escalation, but this escalation could bring the war to an end. Trump also used that summit to announce that he was willing to license the production of Patriot air defense missiles to Ukraine, allowing Ukraine to build its own to tackle the problem of Russia's ballistic and cruise missile attacks. That is huge. It basically amounts to the US encouraging Ukraine to keep doing what it's doing on the long-range front while also helping Ukraine take a step closer toward minimizing the impact of Russia's own long-range strategy. Putin doesn't know where to turn anymore. And for one last little dig into his side, Ukraine has also announced something else. On top of the LRGIC, Ukraine is also going to restructure the leadership and management of its existing assault forces. with the commander of the country's 8th Air Assault Corps, Brigadier General Dmytro Voloshin, seemingly having been tapped up to lead a new reaction force that will oversee this restructuring. Dubbed the Joint Rapid Reaction Forces, this new component of Ukraine's armed forces will combine existing assault, drone, and artillery units into a single force capable of rapid deployment across the front while equipped with the sort of technology that Russia simply isn't able to offer to its soldiers. This is military reform on the front to complement what Ukraine plans to do in the Russian rear, and it means that Putin's faltering forces inside Ukraine will face even bigger challenges. Rapid responses to Russian weakness will lead to territory being liberated and Russian assaults being shut down before they start. So, what do you see from all of this? Putin's inner circle is braying for peace, albeit not in earshot of their leader, and Ukraine is more than willing to work alongside those elites to achieve that peace. Pressure is being piled on with the formation of new groups that make Ukraine's deep strike and assault units stronger than ever. And even the US is sending signals to Putin that enough is enough. Ukraine is winning. Russia can't turn this around. Back down now or the end will come for Putin sooner than he thinks. As for Putin himself, the paranoia that has always defined him as a leader is now his greatest enemy. The former KGB man has twisted and turned his way into a situation where he is running out of options. What does he do now? Escalate? Send the war he started into Europe? Putin may do that out of desperation, but he'll only be forcing an already drained Russia into a fight against NATO at a time when the US seems to be behind Ukraine, and NATO's European members are preparing for a fight. That's not a good idea. But what else does Putin have? His traditional scare tactics aren't working anymore. If anything, it's Ukraine that has the upper hand in the fear department, just as it has the upper hand on the battlefield. Putin can't force more manpower into the Ukraine war without mobilizing, and it has become impossible for Putin to conceal the fact that the war he started has come back to bite the Russian people. They feel that pain at the gas pumps, and every time they see the smoke rise from yet another refinery or factory that Ukraine's drones hit. Putin has to face up to the fact that he really only has two choices remaining: agree to peace in the Ukraine war and then try to deal with his inner circle that is sick of him, or keep pushing the fight knowing that Ukraine is getting stronger, the strikes are getting deeper, and those members of the inner circle who want peace right now may soon decide that the only way to get it is to get rid of Putin. You made your own bed, Putin. Ukraine is just making you lie in it. Russia's war against Ukraine has already come at a human cost so enormous that it alone has put plenty of pressure on Putin. That cost is higher than you might think. The 1.42 million casualties we mentioned are just the start. What Putin has really done is create a crisis inside Russia so massive that it would take decades for any sort of recovery to happen. Do you want to find out more? Then check out our video where we cover the demographic crisis that looms over Russia's head. But before you do that, remember to subscribe to The Military Show to keep track of our daily videos covering the latest developments in the Ukraine war. And thank you, as always, for watching.